Hello and welcome back to 20-somethings TV Hot Topics. I'm your host, Matt, and I'm joined today by my co-hosts, Morgan, Devin, and Eric. First up today is a story from Florida where a principal was forced to resign for showing a class of middle schoolers a picture of David by Michelangelo. There's claims that this was pornographic. Was it pornographic, Eric?
No, it's art. You can't put it more straightforward than that. It's been around for centuries. It's a historical piece of art. I don't get why, even in middle school, you're 13, what is wrong with showing them a marble statue from hundreds of years ago?
I think it's important to also take it in the context that it was in. I think it's easy to be like, oh, look at this strange thing that happened in a bottle. But the purpose of it is to try and catch up on the very vague laws being implemented in Florida that are very anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's out of the desire to not sexualize things. But I think it's funny because it's super hypocritical and just kind of ironic when they say oh, we can't sexualize this. We can't sexualize these kids when they're the ones who are sexualizing the statue. It's in its most sexual form. That's not what I was trying to say, but
Hey.
The statue is not sexual, is what I'm saying. And to say that the human body is inherently sexual is sexualizing it. I think that the purpose of these bills to try and get the conversation to stop talking about the way that human beings are is very strange, and to it's sexualizing gay people as well. Just them being gay is a sexual act, which is completely untrue. And the way that heterosexuality permeates through society is kind of blind to them, because heterosexual love is considered normal to them.
Institutionalized.
So it's not sexual, but then homosexual love is for no reason, And I think that it just kind of goes along with it. The image of a penis is sexual to them because it has to be, otherwise they're kind of going back on their word. So I think it's less about the art and attacking art, and more just attacking people for who they are and just the way they exist outside of sex.
Yeah. I also just thought it was really great that Italy was just hey, come on down.
Yeah, even there, why do you give a shit?
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
It's not at all, and it shouldn't, that principal shouldn't have had to resign. They lost their job because of that.
Because of a
that's
statue.
Insane.
So
it's
stupid.
ridiculous.
Where does the line drawn for Florida parents, their involvement in their kids' education? Where does that line draw for you?
I mean,
if there's a place.
I think it should be more age dependent than anything else. Of course, it still depends on the content, but once a kid passes 10, they're not obviously fully matured, but they're starting to get a bit of an understanding of the world. I don't see why showing them a statue of a buff dude is a problem. I don't think parents should be able to intervene that much on their children's education. It's up to the school for what they're being shown.
There's definitely not a hard line. There's always room for conversation on it. I just feel the conversation's happening in bad faith. And it seems parents are not up in arms for legitimate reasons, more that they're up in arms for personal reasons. And it presents a problem when people's individual values are coming into conflict with kids learning about the world that they live in. And I think protecting kids is so not protecting them. It's just lying to them to try and indoctrinate people into the common belief. And I think it opens the door for a lot of problematic things, much more so than just not telling sixth graders about the David. I think obviously that is stupid, but I think it represents a bigger problem about the conversations being held in schools. 13 people have ideas about what's going on around them. They're much more mature, especially these days with unlimited internet access.
Yeah. You didn't?
Sorry?
You didn't when you were 13?
What are you talking about?
I don't know.
Anyway, speaking of a statuesque figure, Jonathan Majors was recently arraigned on several accounts of assault. So we're going to roll into a clip that we have of that, and then we're going to discuss it.
Breaking news overnight, and Creed 3 actor Jonathan Majors arrested on an assault charge here in New York City over an alleged domestic dispute. A rep for the actor saying he's done, quote, nothing wrong. ABC's Jacqueline Lee is here with the latest. And Jacqueline, his team saying they're looking to clear his name.
That's right, Janae. Good morning. Hollywood actor Jonathan Majors facing some very serious allegations. The 33-year-old was arrested in New York City Saturday morning, charged with strangulation, assault, and harassment after an alleged domestic dispute with a 30-year-old woman.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Ouch. Ouch is right. This is incredibly upsetting news. I think I speak for everyone when I say I hope that it's not true. But I'm not even going to call it a recurring theme because, no, it is a recurring theme, obviously, amongst people in Hollywood. But how do you all cope with artists that commit something heinous? Are you able to separate the art from the artist in some regard, or is it just a complete turnoff when something like this happens?
See, I think the issue is that people don't look at celebrities as people. So, how would you do if this was someone you knew? You would do the same thing. It's just because they're a public figure doesn't mean that you should be able to excuse anything they're doing. There is no outlook on this where it's okay. And that's only speaking if it is true. Obviously, they haven't come to a exact decision on that, and the news on that keeps changing. But I think with something like this, you shouldn't try to separate the art and the artist because they are people. This did happen in our world. This is still a real event. And I think that's something that is very overlooked.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that I don't know, some things like this, I think in future movies, that actor should be recast. But I also think that sometimes past movies or past things can be, rewatched or whatever. But mostly because there are other people in that worked very hard to create that, and it's not like that one person's thing. If it was, then I think that's when you try to, stay away from that and not, interact with that artist's art. But if there are other people that spent time and money and effort and put their heart and energy into things like that, it's important to recognize that at least.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a separation between being canceled and just having consequences for your actions.
Sure.
If this is true, yeah, it's impossible to look at him the same, committing a violent act like that. That being said, this case individually seems a bit different in the way that his team responded.
Yeah.
Usually there's a very vague, oh no, they would never do this. But this was a very targeted, we have video proof that this did not happen.
It was immediate.
So I think it's important to wait until we get all the facts. I think people have such parasocial relationships with people. They sort of like high school, I think, with celebrities, that everybody knows everybody in high school, so the drama's bubbling around about who did what. I think with celebrities, it's on a much bigger scale. We all know who these people are.
Sure.
So it's exciting when something happens. So I think people jump on the opportunity in both ways to either say that, oh, they would never do this because I know them, or they did this in the category they're horrible. And I think it prevents a bad place to have conversations about these things, because we say it's common theme in Hollywood. I think it's a common theme everywhere.
True, yeah.
Domestic abuse and just abuse in general is rampant. Pretty much anywhere you look. So I think it's important, like you were saying, that we don't treat them as people. I think it's important to do that in both ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand that, I feel like we look at them in a very binary way, good or bad.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know.
People aren't that simple.
Yeah.
It's never that straightforward. And I think this case is also interesting because we're getting all these comments from his legal team saying we have proof this didn't happen. But then you also have the other side where it's why is there a woman in the hospital? There's other people who are now saying he's a trouble to work with on set. So it's
tons of reports coming out saying.
What do you believe?
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. I did not hear that.
It's tough. Well, speaking of superheroes, recently, unfortunately, Shazam: The Fury of Gods, the sequel to the 2019 Shazam, it's going through a bit of a domestic box office flop. And this, speaking of recurring themes, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, a Jonathan Majors movie, it was a bit of a critical flop. And several of the superhero movies that have come out since, I would say, probably the pandemic have been really struggling both critically and domestically. Is this is this the end of superhero success?
I would say it's never going to end because of how much of a hold it currently has on modern pop culture, but there's very clearly a superhero fatigue going on right now. Like, I had seen every DC movie until Shazam. I'm not going to go see it in theaters. I have no interest in it. Superhero movies are getting tiring, and they're repetitive, and it's the same thing over and over again, which sucks to say because I'm sure I've seen people saying that Shazam is not that bad of a movie, but I don't know if it's the timing. I don't know if it's
DC.
Going through a reboot, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, how many general audiences even know about that is the other question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know all the factors. I don't know all the causes, but
There's definitely an oversaturation of the market. But
Yeah,
I think also it's like,
obviously, yeah.
it's the way that these movies are being made. I think to satisfy the amount of market that there is for these movies, they're trying to pump them out as fast as possible, which is like spreading the visual effects teams really thin, and visual effects are taking a downgrade. When you look at, previous Marvel movies compared to the movies that are coming out now, when they had 2 coming out per year a couple years ago to now they have like 4 or 5, or they have all these shows, there's definitely a downturn in quality. And then you look at something like The Batman, which had practical effects and was done very much like a
Yeah.
classic movie,
Great movie.
and it succeeded. I think that people are really drawn to superhero stories because it's a great vehicle for story, just at its base level, like a hero's journey. It does a really good job of framing that. But I think just the way that they're being produced right now, because people are aware that there's this big boom in the market and they should cash in on that as fast as possible. So there's just this effort of just churning out as many as possible, and the quality kind of just takes a second, like a back seat, I guess.
Yeah.
they're not the only sequels coming out right now either. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Scream was successful, Creed was successful, John Wick is very
Wick Chapter 4, of course.
successful.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's like a sequel thing. I mean, as much as sequels have been frowned upon
It's a
to an
saturation
extent,
thing.
it's the fact that we've had nearly 30 Marvel movies since 2008.
I can tell you the root of the problem right now. It's streaming.
It is true.
It's streaming. I can say personally, before Avengers Endgame came out, I think I watched all 22 of the Marvel movies in chronological order each day before the movie came out, because that's how excited I was for it. And I don't think I've watched the last 5 Disney Plus series for Marvel shows. I can't keep up with it.
There's too much.
too many. There's 4 or 5 shows a year, plus 3 or 4 movies.
And they're required reading also. Everything is
yeah.
important.
They're
Yeah,
pretty much
yeah,
they're required reading, but at the same time, it's on these Disney shows. It's almost like it's a costume change for some of them, and it's like, why did I just waste my time watching that? And a lot of them are critically mixed. There's only been a couple series that everyone can agree on that were actually legitimately good. But are you all okay with most of the films this year are going to be franchise films?
I mean,
Straight up, this is the year of the franchise. We have a Barbie movie coming out this year.
I don't have an issue with franchises. I don't think that making a sequel to something, if you have the right story for it, is wrong. But I
course, yeah.
think when you push it so hard to make that sequel that it just becomes painful to the audience, that it becomes a problem. And I'm glad that it looks like they're starting to step back and realize that this is happening. They're starting to cut down on the releases, because there was supposed to be a lot more Marvel this year.
Yeah,
than
Bob
there's going to
Iger,
be.
Yeah.
the former CEO and chairman, I believe, Bob Iger steps back in, and he's heavily reducing the amount of series that are coming out this year, which is
It's good. It's
very
necessary.
very relieving. Yeah, I can't keep up with that. But yeah, I think that's it for today's episode of 20-somethings TV Hot Topics. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Peace.